There's a kind of power that doesn't roar. It doesn't shout. It doesn't try to prove itself. It simply is. And its presence is undeniable. We live in a world addicted to noise. Everyone's trying to be heard, to explain, to justify, to react. But the Stoic knows the real strength often lies not in what is said, but in what is withheld. Silence, when used with intent, can cut sharper than the loudest voice. It creates mystery. It commands respect. And more importantly, it gives you control. In this video, we're going to dive deep into how silence, when chosen with purpose, becomes a force of influence, stability, and self-mastery. Whether it's in relationships, conflicts, negotiations, or your own inner battles, mastering the art of strategic silence will separate you from the reactive crowd and elevate you into a class of your own. So if you're someone who's tired of wasting your energy on fruitless arguments, if you want to attract respect without chasing it, and if you're ready to wield silence not as a retreat but as your sharpest weapon, then stay with me until the end. And if you're serious about rising above emotional noise and learning to lead with presence and wisdom, make sure to subscribe to the Everlasting Stoic. Hit the like button and prepare to see things from a higher vantage point. Let's begin. 1. Make silence a conscious choice. Silence, when chosen consciously, is not a void. It is a presence. It is not the absence of action, but the essence of intention. And the difference between weak silence and powerful silence lies in this exact truth. Are you using silence, or is silence using you? The reactive mind fears silence. In a conversation, a disagreement, or a moment of vulnerability, we feel an almost irresistible urge to fill the space. We want to explain ourselves, defend ourselves, overcorrect, clarify, but often in trying to manage how others perceive us, we end up losing control over ourselves. The Stoic doesn't fear the silence. The Stoic inhabits it. In a world of impulsive replies and rapid-fire responses, your stillness becomes a statement. Your pause becomes a presence. It doesn't mean apathy. It doesn't mean weakness. It means you've chosen not to let your emotions dictate the rhythm of your life. Let's be clear. There's a difference between silence that stems from avoidance and silence that stems from mastery. Avoidance runs. Mastery waits. Avoidance hides. Mastery observes. When you choose silence, you are telling the world, I am not here to perform for your approval. I do not need to fill your discomfort with my validation. And people feel that. They may not know what it is exactly, but they feel your energy when you're able to hold your ground without needing to explain yourself. They feel your strength when you refuse to let chaos draw you in. Think about this. How many arguments have escalated because someone couldn't resist the need to have the last word? How many misunderstandings have become full-blown resentments because people couldn't pause and just let things settle? Now think about the opposite. Think about the most composed person you've ever seen. Maybe it was someone in a negotiation. Maybe it was a mentor. Maybe it was someone who, in the middle of chaos, simply looked at you and said nothing. And yet, you felt everything. That's power. That's authority. And it begins with silence. But silence isn't just about what you don't say. It's about why you don't say it. You don't speak because you're not ready? That's avoidance. You don't speak because it would do more harm than good? That's wisdom. You don't speak because you've said all that needs to be said. Now the truth must reveal itself. That's mastery. You see, silence without intention is dead air. But silence with awareness becomes a tool, It becomes your frame. The energy you stand in, the tempo you control, the boundary you enforce not with words but with presence. One of the greatest demonstrations of power is restraint. When someone is trying to bait you emotionally, psychologically, energetically, and you don't bite, you rise above the game entirely. And in that moment, you become untouchable. Not because you won, but because you refuse to play at all. In relationships, this is especially vital. Sometimes your silence says more than 1,000 apologies ever could. When someone knows they've crossed a line, and you don't yell, you don't text, you don't lecture, you simply remove your energy, that silence speaks louder than anything you could say. It creates a vacuum that forces reflection, and in that vacuum, they either rise to meet your standard or reveal they were never meant to. But this kind of silence must be practiced. It must be intentional. It must be anchored, because silence without inner strength becomes a mask, and eventually the mask will slip. So how do you practice powerful silence? First, get comfortable with your own thoughts. If you cannot sit alone with your emotions, you will constantly seek to offload them through speech. That means meditating, journaling, going for long walks without distraction, training your nervous system to settle rather than react. Second, observe before reacting. In conversation, learn to pause. When someone says something provocative or triggering, don't rush to respond. Let the moment breathe. Let the silence expand. You'll be amazed how quickly people reveal their true selves when you stop filling the space for them. Third, detach from the need to be understood. This is a hard one, but so much of our verbal excess comes from a deep, ego-driven desire to control perception. We want others to get us, to see our point, to know our truth. But sometimes, the most powerful truth is the one left unspoken. Let your energy speak for you. Let your consistency tell your story. Finally, remember this. You are not obligated to explain your piece to those who thrive in chaos. Your silence is not a gap in the conversation. It is a fortress of sovereignty. Now here's something to reflect on. Think back to a time when your silence said more than your words could have. What did that moment teach you about power, control, and presence? Or better yet, if you're committing today to practicing intentional silence, drop this phrase in the comments. My silence is my strength. Let that be your vow. Let that be your reminder. We'll continue this journey in the next chapter, where we'll talk about the rhythm of human connection and how silence lets you control the tempo itself. 2. Control the tempo of engagement. There is a hidden current running beneath every human interaction. You may not always notice it, but it's always there, dictating the rhythm, the flow, the pace. That current is the tempo of engagement, and the one who controls the tempo controls the dance. In the realm of communication, there are two types of people: those who react and those who regulate. Reactors operate on the tempo of others. They reply immediately. They answer every call. They return every message the moment it pings. They get pulled into the rhythm of whoever is on the other end of the interaction. But those who regulate, they pause. They set the pace. They decide when to engage and when to remain still. To be stoic is to choose your tempo deliberately. It is to recognize that your energy, your focus, your peace, none of it should be auctioned off to whoever knocks first. You are not on call for the world. You are not here to be at the emotional mercy of anyone who demands your attention. And silence, once again, becomes your ally. Think of a powerful musician. They don't just play notes. They master the silence between the notes. That space, That pause, that deliberate restraint, is what gives the music weight and meaning. You are no different. The power of your presence is defined not by how much you give, but how intentionally you give it. When you delay a reply, when you take your time to answer, when you make someone wait before you reappear, you are telling them without saying a word, I move on my own time, not to be cruel, not to play games, but to assert control over your reality. This is especially vital in relationships. Early on, when attraction is blooming and communication is frequent, it's easy to get swept up in someone else's rhythm. They text, you reply. They call, you answer. They need, you provide. And before you know it, you've become a character in their story, instead of the author of your own. But when you become more deliberate, when you slow things down, when you respond thoughtfully, when you create space between stimulus and reaction, you reset the dynamic. You stop being reactive, and you become reflective. You're no longer a leaf caught in the wind of someone else's emotions. You are the mountain unmoved. Controlling the tempo doesn't mean ignoring people. It doesn't mean going cold. It means being sovereign over your own time, energy, and focus. And it means that others must rise to meet your standard, rather than pulling you into theirs. Even in conflict, this principle holds. When someone sends an emotionally loaded message or voice note, the immediate urge is to fire back. But the Stoic breathes, waits, lets the heat dissipate, and only then, if necessary, responds with clarity, not combustion. By slowing the rhythm, you force others to meet you where you are. You unhook yourself from the chaos of urgency. You step back into mastery. Think of the greatest leaders, the most composed people you've seen. They never rush to reply. They make you feel like their words are measured, their timing intentional. That's not an accident. That's deliberate discipline. They've trained themselves not to be slaves to the world's tempo, but to move in accordance with their own values. This principle even extends beyond communication. It applies to decisions, investments, opportunities. The world will always rush you. Act now, reply now, buy now, fix it now. But power belongs to the one who can sit in uncertainty without panicking, to the one who waits, observes, discerns. Because in that stillness, truth reveals itself. So ask yourself, are you dancing to someone else's beat, or are you choosing your own? If this resonates, here's your reflection point. What's one area in your life where you've been rushing to respond, when you should have been regulating the pace? Drop it in the comments. Or if you're committing today to becoming a regulator of your energy, a guardian of your tempo, write this: I choose the tempo. I move with intention. Let those words become your compass. Now let's move into the next chapter. Because not every message needs words. Sometimes the loudest truth is lived, not spoken. 3. Speak through actions, not emotion. The words are everywhere. Promises are cheap. Explanations are endless. But the Stoic knows the truest language is action. Quiet, consistent, unwavering. Too many people live in emotional overflow. They speak from the peaks of passion, from the pits of fear, from the sudden rush of insecurity. And while emotion has its place, the man or woman who acts rather than reacts becomes unshakable. You've heard the saying, "Don't tell me, show me." That's Stoicism in motion. When someone hurts you, you don't need to type a 3-paragraph message explaining your boundaries. You hold the boundary. When someone disrespects your value, you don't need to scream it louder. You withdraw the privilege of your presence. When someone takes you for granted, you don't beg for recognition. You disappear, and your absence says it all. This isn't manipulation. This is self-respect. It's easy to talk about standards. It's easy to talk about self-worth. But until you embody those things in your actions without emotional leakage, they're just noise. You want someone to respect your time. Start respecting your own first. You want someone to value your love. Then don't give it away to those who don't earn it. You want someone to take you seriously. Then stop making emotional threats you don't intend to enforce. Because every time you speak from unregulated emotion, your credibility erodes. The world stops taking you seriously. Not because you don't feel deeply, but because you don't anchor your depth in discipline. Imagine two people. The first reacts instantly to every slight, every misstep. They're constantly explaining how they feel, why they're hurt, what you did wrong. The second says nothing. They simply shift their behavior. They pull back, they redirect, they adjust, and suddenly, you feel the gravity of their action. Which one moves you more? The second one. Because while the emotional reactor is speaking for validation, the stoic actor is speaking for impact. When you speak through actions, you give no room for debate, no room for misinterpretation, no room for emotional rebuttal. What you do is clear, it's precise, and it can't be argued with. This is especially crucial in romantic relationships. Telling someone how they should treat you means little if you tolerate the opposite. Telling someone you're done only to come back after 3 days teaches them that your emotions are temporary storms, not final shifts. But when you act from clarity, not anger, not sadness, not desperation, but clarity, your silence becomes law. Your actions become scripture. The Stoic never shouts their worth. They live it. They walk away not to punish, but to preserve. They stop replying not to manipulate, but to protect peace. They end cycles not because it hurts less, but because they know pain isn't the compass integrity is. It's also important to note, this isn't about coldness. It's not about becoming a robot. Emotion is beautiful, but emotion is fuel, not the driver. You channel it. You don't serve it. So the next time you're tempted to explain yourself, pause. Ask, what would speak louder, my words or my behavior? And remember, consistency is the ultimate message. You don't need to announce what you're becoming. Let them see it when they no longer recognize the version of you they thought would stay the same. No engagement prompt here. Let this one sit with them. Let it simmer. We'll continue in the next chapter. How your absence, when aligned with dignity, can echo louder than any presence. 4. Make them feel your absence. Presence is influence, but absence, when executed with dignity, can be unforgettable. There's a reason the phrase, absence makes the heart grow fonder, has lasted through the ages, but the truth is more nuanced than that. Absence doesn't just spark longing, it reveals value. Here's the paradox of human behavior. We tend to overlook what's always available and crave what suddenly withdraws, not because we're cruel, but because the human psyche is wired to awaken when a void is created. If you are always present, always replying, always offering, always available, you become ambient noise. You blend into the background of someone's day. But when you remove your presence, without resentment, without games, but with intention, the silence that follows isn't empty. It's filled with meaning. And if you've built your presence on quality, your absence becomes loud. This is not about going cold or playing power games. It's about learning to withdraw gracefully when your presence is no longer respected. It's about knowing when your words no longer land, when your value is being taken for granted, when your energy is being drained in a loop of diminishing returns, and instead of arguing, instead of proving, instead of pushing, you step back, silently, firmly, fully. You let the gaps speak. Most people fear being forgotten. That's why they cling. That's why they over-explain. That's why they double-text, justify, chase. But in doing so, they dilute their power. Because nothing of true value needs to convince someone to recognize it. Absence, when chosen with composure, becomes a mirror. It forces others to confront the space you once filled, to reflect on the version of themselves they were when you were present. You'd be surprised how clearly people begin to think once you stop reminding them of your worth. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone will miss you. Some will be relieved by your absence. Let them. That reaction is a revelation, not a loss. If your silence doesn't echo in someone's life, your presence never truly mattered to them. Let that sting. Then let it sharpen you. But for those who do feel it, for those who suddenly look around and notice what's missing, it awakens something far more powerful than words ever could. It awakens contrast. They remember the stability you brought, the way you listened, the energy you gave without asking for much in return. They feel the calm you carried, like a shield through their chaos. And now it's gone. That absence forces a reckoning. Sometimes it leads to appreciation. Sometimes to regret. Sometimes to growth. But none of that is your responsibility to chase. Your job is simply to honor your boundaries, protect your spirit, and never punish with silence. But also never fear using it. This is not about disappearing in anger. It's about rising in clarity. It's not retreat, it's recalibration. A silent withdrawal from situations, dynamics, or relationships that no longer reflect your growth. In romantic relationships, this becomes especially poignant. You don't scream for closure. You don't collapse in front of indifference. You don't remind someone of what they're losing every time they devalue you. Instead, you go quiet, and in that quiet, you reclaim your identity. Some people only hear your truth when they can no longer speak over it. And when you do this from a place of peace, not pain, it changes you. You begin to understand that your value was never in how loud you spoke or how much you gave. It was in your very presence, in the space you held. So now I'll ask you something personal. Have you ever withdrawn from someone or something and watched clarity rush in? Have you ever realized, only after stepping away, just how much of yourself you were giving without it being honored? If you have, share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it. Or if you're committing today to only offering your presence where it's earned, type this below. My absence will speak where my presence was ignored. Let that be your truth. Let it echo for those who are listening. Now let's move deeper. Because once you've stepped back, something fascinating begins to happen. They start trying to make sense of the silence. And that's where real psychology begins. 5. Let them project their own meaning. 5. Human beings are meaning-making creatures. When presented with ambiguity, we search for patterns. When faced with silence, we begin to project. And that's where your restraint becomes more powerful than any explanation could ever be. When you say nothing, they start filling in the blanks. This is one of the most psychologically potent aspects of silence. It creates internal dialogue in the minds of others. Your absence, your non-response, your stillness, It forces them to engage in an internal debate that no argument from you could ever win. And here's the twist. People don't respond to you. They respond to their interpretation of you. If you've been solid, steady, giving, calm, and you suddenly go quiet, they'll feel that shift. And in the space that opens, their mind will reach for an answer. They'll wonder, did I go too far? Did I lose something valuable? Why did they go silent? What did I miss? And that wonder is where growth, regret, or reflection can bloom. But if you speak too soon, if you rush to clarify your silence, you rob them of that moment. This is where discipline becomes essential. Because the urge to explain, to defend, to clear the air is incredibly strong. Especially if you're emotionally invested. But emotional maturity often means letting the silence do the heavy lifting for you. Think of the great leaders of history, the wise mentors, the unshakable elders. They don't explain themselves unless absolutely necessary. They don't argue for their position. They embody it. And their silence carries weight because their presence once did. When you learn to let others project, you begin to notice something remarkable. They'll often see what they're ready to see, not what you wanted them to. Some will finally recognize your boundaries. Others will finally notice their disrespect. Some will respond with apology. Others with silence of their own. But all of that tells you who they are, and none of it requires you to speak. This is also why silence can be dangerous if misused. If your silence comes from bitterness or ego, people feel that. They'll project defensiveness instead of reflection. But if your silence comes from peace and principle, they feel a shift in energy, not an emotional void. In relationships, this concept becomes a crucible. When you stop chasing, stop over-explaining, stop trying to be understood, you create a space where the other person must confront themselves, without distraction, without your words as a shield, just their own conscience, echoing in the quiet you've left behind. This doesn't guarantee a resolution, but it guarantees a revelation. Who they become in that silence tells you everything you need to know. Let them project. Let them wrestle with the version of you they built in their own mind. Let the space you created show them what their noise was hiding. Because here's the truth. People don't change when you talk louder. They change when your absence makes them hear what they were refusing to face. They change when your silence becomes a mirror too loud to ignore. You, however, do not wait for that change. You observe it, you learn from it, and you continue forward, unattached to outcome, committed to principle. You'll know you're growing when you no longer fear what others might think about your silence, because you know exactly what it means. No need to ask for engagement here. Let the lesson speak for itself. Next, we'll explore the kind of energy that emanates even when your mouth is closed. The silent vibration that speaks louder than language. Thix. Your energy speaks loudest in stillness. Not all communication comes from your voice. In fact, the most powerful messages you'll ever send don't come from your mouth at all. They come from your presence. They come from your energy. They come from your ability to remain composed, still, and centered, even when the world around you is spiraling in chaos. There's a field you carry with you, a vibration you emit. Call it presence. Call it frequency. Call it alignment. Whatever name you give it, it's something people feel long before they process what you're saying. It's in your posture. It's in your gaze. It's in the way you breathe when someone tries to provoke you, and you choose not to flinch. It's in how you walk into a room and immediately shift the atmosphere without a word. This is what happens when you practice inner stillness. You begin to radiate a power that precedes language, a calm that doesn't need explanation, an aura that says, I am anchored. People may not be able to describe it, but they know it when they feel it. It's what separates the reactive from the composed, the frantic from the sovereign, and it's what makes your silence speak louder than speeches. Stoics cultivated this kind of presence. Marcus Aurelius wasn't respected for being the loudest emperor in the forum. He was respected because his energy was tempered, introspective, and still. He didn't have to declare his authority. It was felt in his restraint. It was known in his integrity. And most of all, it was preserved through the quiet strength he carried. Even as the world tested him, you don't need to wear a crown to walk in that energy. It begins by mastering your own emotional weather. Because here's the truth. If you're always agitated, offended, seeking attention, over-explaining, you're leaking energy. And what you leak, others feed on. But when you retain your energy, when you stop reacting to every stimulus, every comment, every emotional jab, you become dangerously calm. Not in a threatening way, but in a way that signals you are no longer at the mercy of your environment. Imagine someone trying to bait you into a pointless argument. They raise their voice. They try to provoke you, but instead of matching their frequency, you look them in the eye and you say nothing. You don't retreat. You don't explode. You simply hold. And in that moment, your energy tells them everything they need to know. This is a man or a woman who cannot be moved without permission. Stillness becomes your firewall. It filters out chaos. It breaks the pattern of codependent interaction. And it creates a container where people must either rise to your frequency or fall away. This principle is critical in relationships. When someone you care about brings drama, emotion, volatility, your instinct might be to match their intensity, to plead, to chase, to argue. But every time you do that, you're operating on their level. You're giving away your frame. But when you remain still, when your energy says, I refuse to abandon my peace for anyone, you change the dynamic completely. You teach them, not with words, but with being. If you want access to me, you must come correct. Because access is not a right, it is a privilege. And your stillness becomes the doormat. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. There is great humility in restraint. There is great wisdom in choosing to carry yourself with presence rather than performance. And once you've tasted that stillness, once you've watched someone unravel because you wouldn't join them in their chaos, you start to realize just how rare and valuable that energy is. But you can't fake it. You must earn your stillness through inner work, through sitting with your fears instead of reacting to them, through choosing your response even when your emotions beg you to lash out, through letting go of the need to win, the need to prove, the need to be right, because that need is what gives away your power. When you no longer need anything from the moment, you are free to become still within it. And from that stillness, your energy teaches, it repels the wrong, and it attracts the right without needing to chase anything at all. Let your silence speak. Let your posture teach. Let your energy be the loudest thing in the room. And if no one notices, that's fine. You're not doing it to be seen. You're doing it to stay aligned. 7. Protect peace, not ego. There comes a point on this path, this Stoic path, when you must ask yourself a crucial question. Am I defending my ego or am I protecting my peace? The difference between the two is life-changing. Ego wants to win. Peace wants to be free. Ego wants to be heard. Peace wants to remain whole. Ego fights to be right. Peace is content being silent and wise. Most of the suffering we experience in relationships, in arguments, in conflicts, it doesn't come from the event itself. It comes from our attachment to being validated, vindicated, seen as the one who was right, who had the moral high ground, who told them off. But the Stoic doesn't serve ego. The Stoic serves equanimity. And equanimity doesn't need to prove anything. It only seeks to remain undisturbed. This is why the most powerful decision you will make in any emotionally charged situation is to ask, will this response preserve my inner calm, or will it feed my ego? Because ego screams. Peace whispers. Ego wants a reaction. Peace gives you reflection. Ego wants attention. Peace gives you distance. Think about it. How many times have you spoken up just to set the record straight, only to walk away feeling more agitated than before? How many times have you lashed out to make a point, only to realize the cost of your outburst was your own stability? That's the trade. Every time you choose ego over peace, you lose a piece of yourself in the process. But here's where silence becomes sacred. When you say nothing in the face of provocation, not because you're scared, not because you're weak, but because you've chosen peace over performance, you are making a declaration. My energy is no longer available for anything that costs me my inner stillness. And in a world of egos fighting for air, your refusal to engage becomes a revolutionary act. It disarms the game. It dissolves the need for approval. It breaks cycles. Because people expect retaliation. They expect escalation. They want you to react, because your reaction validates their chaos. But when you respond with silence, with grace, with calm, you become unpredictable. You become untouchable. Peace is not passive. It is the fiercest form of strength. It says, I will not let you pull me from my path just to satisfy your ego or mine. And when you live like this, when you truly value peace over performance, you begin to realize just how many battles are not yours to fight. You stop chasing closure. You stop proving your point. You stop playing defense. You let people misjudge you. You let the wrong people walk away. You let the silence explain what words never could. That's freedom. That's Stoic detachment, not from life, but from illusion. The illusion that you need to be heard to be whole. The illusion that you need to win to be powerful. The illusion that your worth is tied to your ability to argue. When you protect peace, not ego, you transcend the battlefield entirely. You step off the stage. You drop the mask. You return to yourself. So here's your challenge, one that will require real honesty. What situation are you in right now, where you're tempted to defend your ego, but your peace is quietly asking you to walk away? Let that question linger. And if you're ready to make the choice that leads to freedom, comment this below. I choose peace over pride. My silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. Not everyone will understand that kind of discipline, but the right ones will feel it. And more importantly, you'll feel it. Next, we'll explore the most powerful move of all, detaching without saying a word. 8. Detach without announcement. There is no silence more absolute than the silence of someone who has truly let go. Not the kind born from bitterness, not the kind used to bait or manipulate, but the kind of detachment that no longer needs to announce itself, because the soul has quietly closed the door. Detachment without announcement is one of the most powerful acts of self-respect you will ever practice. Why? Because it shows the world that your peace is non-negotiable. Not in theory, but in embodiment. You no longer explain your decision. You no longer draft closure speeches. You no longer warn people with emotional ultimatums. You simply remove your energy. And in that moment, the bond is not burned. It's released. Not with drama, not with venom, but with clarity so clean, so silent, that it leaves behind nothing but your echo. This is where most people struggle. We are taught to narrate our exits, to make our departure known, to make sure they know what they lost. But that's still ego talking. That's still a desire to be seen and validated in the letting go. The Stoic understands, if it truly no longer serves you, you don't need to narrate your freedom. You simply walk, because when you truly detach, it is no longer about teaching them a lesson. It's about no longer needing them to learn it. And that is the difference between reactive withdrawal and spiritual detachment. Reactive withdrawal says, I'm leaving so you'll realize my value. Spiritual detachment says, I'm leaving because I finally remembered it myself. This kind of exit isn't loud, but it changes you. It doesn't come from anger. It comes from awakening. You realize how long you held on to something that was never yours to carry. You see how much you dimmed yourself to accommodate a dynamic that could not reflect your truth. And when you wake up from that trance, there is nothing left to say. Only silence and forward motion. It might confuse them. It might even provoke them. They may reach out, expecting the old version of you to reply. But the absence of your reply speaks volumes. Not out of cruelty, not out of punishment, but because you now understand that going backward for closure is a luxury you no longer afford your peace. And that is what makes detachment so disorienting for others. They are used to the cycle. They expect you to return for one more round of justification. They're waiting for the explanation, the lecture, the tearful text, but none comes. Only silence. And that silence becomes their reckoning. Because suddenly, they're alone with their actions, alone with their consequences, alone with the echo of a presence that once grounded them and is now gone. They may never admit it. They may never apologize. They may even project blame. But all of that is irrelevant. Because when you detach without announcement, you are no longer tracking the outcome. You are not waiting for them to catch up. You are not holding space for their awakening. You have shifted the focus inward onto your healing, your elevation, your alignment. And that shift, it's not just a moment, it's a rebirth. There's no need to slam the door. There's no need to prove your absence. You have simply realized that staying, explaining, trying was costing you something sacred, your center. So you return to it. And when you do, everything else that truly belongs to you begins to find you again. Not because you chased it, but because your silence finally made room for it. So let them wonder, let them project, let them reach out to the version of you that no longer exists. You don't need to respond. You've already answered with your exit. Conclusion. And now, we've reached the end. But it's not really the end. Because if you've listened all the way through, truly listened, something inside you has already begun to shift. Something ancient, something steady, something unshakable. You've learned that silence is not absence. It's not retreat. It's not weakness. Silence, when chosen with discipline and purpose, is a form of power that doesn't ask for attention. It commands it. In a world driven by noise, reactivity, and the desperate need to be seen, you now know the truth. It's the one who controls their response, who owns their energy, who moves with intention that ultimately shapes the world around them. Let your silence become your sanctuary. Let your stillness become your statement. And let your withdrawal be the final lesson to those who never learned to value your presence. If this video struck a chord with you, if it helped you reclaim your sense of power, presence, or peace, then I invite you to join this journey. Subscribe to the Everlasting Stoic, where we walk the quiet path of strength, where we choose reflection over reaction, presence over performance, and timeless wisdom over temporary noise. Leave a comment below, share your reflections, your vows, your turning points. What resonated most? What moment in this video spoke the loudest without even needing to raise its voice? And if you're ready to live your life with more clarity, silence, and inner power, then hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs it. And keep walking. This is just the beginning. Your presence, your stillness is your legacy. Until next time, remain grounded, remain intentional, remain everlasting, the everlasting Stoic.